She constantly threatened me with divorce to get her way, until one day I said, "Go ahead," and she filed, losing everything she thought she'd take. The red flags were practically waving in my face, but when you're in love, you tend to mistake manipulation for passion and control for caring. My name is Blake, and I'm a firefighter here in Austin, Texas, working for Station 12 downtown, where I've dedicated my entire career to saving lives and serving my community with pride and genuine purpose. For 3 years, I thought I had a rock-solid marriage with Emma, built on what I genuinely believed was mutual respect, authentic partnership, and the kind of deep emotional connection that could weather any storm life threw at us. Every Thursday evening, like clockwork, Emma would head downtown to this upscale wine bar called Vintage and Vine with her carefully curated circle of ambitious friends, successful lawyers' wives, high-earning real estate agents, and corporate climbers who treated marriage like a sophisticated business transaction requiring strategic maneuvering and calculated psychological warfare rather than genuine love and partnership. I didn't think much of it initially. Everyone needs their social outlet and support system, and I was usually working demanding late shifts saving lives anyway, trusting completely that our relationship was strong enough to weather anything these women might discuss over their expensive bottles of imported wine. But Emma would come home from these weekly gatherings completely transformed, practically glowing with dangerous excitement and new ideas, full of incredibly detailed stories about how her friends had systematically manipulated their husbands into funding luxury purchases, exotic international vacations, and massive home renovations through carefully calculated emotional blackmail and strategic divorce threats delivered at precisely the right psychological moments for maximum emotional impact and financial gain. Jessica got David to buy her that stunning $15,000 diamond tennis bracelet by telling him she felt completely unappreciated and unloved in their marriage. Emma would tell me enthusiastically while scrolling through endless Instagram photos of her friends' latest expensive acquisitions, her voice filled with genuine admiration rather than disgust at the blatant manipulation and emotional abuse. And Maria? She's getting that entire $40,000 kitchen renovation with imported marble countertops and custom Italian cabinetry because she told Carlos she was seriously questioning their entire future together and whether he even cared about her happiness or just saw her as a convenient roommate with benefits. I'd listen patiently to these increasingly disturbing manipulative success stories while making us homemade dinner completely from scratch using traditional recipes I'd learned from my grandmother, thinking our relationship was fundamentally different, that we had something real and authentic built on genuine love rather than financial leverage and sophisticated emotional warfare designed to extract maximum material benefits from a partner's devotion. I'd surprise Emma with thoughtful handwritten notes hidden in her coffee mug expressing my deepest feelings about our future together, plan romantic weekend picnics in Zilker Park with all her favorite foods prepared personally by hand, and genuinely believed our connection was special and meaningful because it wasn't based on material transactions or psychological manipulation games that reduced love to a series of calculated power moves designed to control and exploit. But gradually, week by week, Emma became completely convinced she was foolishly accepting mediocrity and settling for far less than she deserved while her friends lived like celebrities with unlimited budgets and devoted husbands who apparently understood their wives' true value and worth. And those Thursday night wine bar sessions became her weekly masterclass education in advanced marital manipulation, where she learned that threatening abandonment was supposedly the ultimate power move and most devastatingly effective weapon in any relationship dynamic between husband and wife. Emma began experimenting with her friends' psychological warfare tactics on me with the subtle precision of someone testing the waters before diving headfirst into full manipulation mode, carefully observing my reactions to gauge how effectively she could control my behavior through emotional pressure. It started small, almost innocently, with passive-aggressive comments delivered with just enough sweetness to make me question whether I was overreacting to what seemed like harmless observations about our relationship dynamics compared to her friends' supposedly superior marriages. "You know, Blake, Sarah's husband just surprised her with a weekend trip to Napa Valley because he said she deserved to be treated like a queen," Emma would mention casually while scrolling through social media photos of expensive wine tastings and luxury hotel suites, her tone carefully neutral but her eyes watching my reaction intently for signs of guilt or defensiveness. And here I am, getting excited about our Saturday morning pancakes at home like some kind of easily satisfied housewife who doesn't know her own worth or what she should expect from a devoted husband. When I would patiently suggest budget-conscious date nights like hiking at Barton Creek or catching a movie during Discount Tuesday, Emma would sigh dramatically and make pointed comments about how other firefighters' wives got treated like absolute royalty while she had to settle for whatever scraps of romance fit into our modest budget constraints and my apparent lack of creativity. I saw Jennifer at the grocery store yesterday, and she was bragging about how Mike took her to that new steakhouse downtown for their anniversary. She'd say with calculated disappointment dripping from every word. Must be nice to have a husband who doesn't make excuses about money every single time you want to do something special together or feel valued in your relationship. When I would patiently explain our carefully planned savings goals for a house down payment, showing her the detailed spreadsheet I'd maintained with our projected timeline for homeownership and financial stability, Emma would dismiss my responsible financial planning as making pathetic excuses for being unambitious and lacking the basic provider instincts that real men possessed naturally without needing spreadsheets or budgets. "Blake, you're always talking about the future, but what about right now?" she'd argue with growing frustration and barely concealed contempt. "What about making me feel valued and appreciated today instead of promising me some hypothetical dream house that might happen someday if we pinch every penny and live like paupers?" She successfully manipulated me into buying her an expensive $800 designer handbag by suggesting with perfectly timed tears in her eyes that I didn't value her enough as my wife to want her to feel confident and beautiful when she went out with her successful friends who all carried luxury accessories that reflected their husband's devotion. "I just feel so embarrassed and ashamed when we go out together," she sobbed convincingly, dabbing at her eyes with tissue. "All the other wives have nice things that show how much their husbands love them, and I'm carrying this old purse from Target like some college student who can't afford better or doesn't deserve quality items." When I picked up extra shifts at the fire station to afford that handbag, working grueling 60-hour weeks and coming home completely exhausted from saving lives and dealing with traumatic emergencies, Emma felt a dangerous rush of power and control that convinced her the manipulation was working exactly as her wine bar friends had promised it would. This first major victory in extracting expensive gifts through calculated emotional manipulation convinced her that her Thursday night advisors were absolutely right about men needing to be trained through strategic pressure, guilt trips, and threats to their masculinity, while I began questioning what had fundamentally changed in the woman I'd married, wondering why someone who used to appreciate simple gestures and genuine affection now seemed constantly dissatisfied with everything I provided. Emma's demands intensified dramatically as she became completely addicted to the intoxicating rush of control and power she felt when successfully manipulating me into funding her increasingly expensive lifestyle fantasies that had absolutely no basis in our actual financial reality or long-term goals. She wanted luxury spa weekends in Napa Valley with her friends, complete with private wine tastings, couples massages, and 5-star accommodations that cost more than my monthly take-home pay, and she expected me to make these extravagant dreams happen without question or hesitation about the devastating financial consequences to our future. "Jessica and David are going to that amazing resort in Sonoma next month," Emma announced one evening while showing me glossy photos on her phone of infinity pools and vineyard views that looked like something from a luxury travel magazine. "It's only $2,800 for the weekend, and I really think we deserve some quality time together away from all this stress and routine that's been suffocating our relationship lately." When I gently pointed out that $2,800 represented nearly half our entire monthly budget and would completely derail our savings goals, Emma rolled her eyes dramatically and accused me of being cheap and unromantic, claiming that real husbands found creative ways to prioritize their wives' happiness over boring spreadsheets and restrictive budget concerns that showed a lack of commitment to the relationship. She wanted a complete jewelry collection upgrade, specifically mentioning a $3,500 diamond tennis bracelet and matching earrings that would supposedly complement her rapidly expanding designer wardrobe, which itself cost more than my monthly salary and required constant expensive additions to stay current with whatever trends her wine bar friends were following this season. "I need pieces that reflect who I am as a person," she'd explain while scrolling through luxury jewelry websites. When I'm out with the girls, I feel like everyone can tell I'm the poor one in the group because my accessories don't match theirs in quality or value. Emma learned to weaponize my masculinity against me with surgical precision, telling me repeatedly that real men found creative ways to provide luxury lifestyles for their wives without making pathetic excuses about money or hiding behind dangerous job rhetoric that she claimed was just a convenient excuse for lack of ambition and drive. Blake, you're always talking about how demanding and stressful your job is, but Mike works construction and still manages to take Jennifer on vacations to Europe twice a year, she'd say with calculated disappointment, comparing my firefighting career unfavorably to men who apparently understood their fundamental responsibilities as providers and protectors. Maybe if you actually cared about advancing your career instead of being content with the same position year after year, we could afford the lifestyle I deserve as your wife. Emma would strategically mention how her friends' husbands had gotten promotions, started successful side businesses, or switched to higher-paying careers entirely, implying constantly that my dedication to my firefighting career showed a fundamental lack of ambition and commitment to her happiness rather than noble service to my community and genuine passion for saving lives. Sarah's husband just got promoted to partner at his law firm, she'd mention while I was trying to unwind after a particularly brutal shift where we'd lost someone despite our best efforts to save them. He's only 32 and already making six figures, while you're still at the exact same level you were when we got married 3 years ago without any apparent plans for advancement. When I tried to discuss our budget rationally, showing her detailed spreadsheets of our actual income versus her proposed expenses, or attempt to explain the severe physical and emotional toll that saving lives took on me daily in ways that affected every aspect of my well-being, she would shut me down completely by questioning whether I was truly committed to our marriage or just going through the motions of being a husband without really caring about her legitimate needs and desires. Other husbands don't make their wives feel guilty for wanting nice things. She'd snap when I suggested we needed to prioritize our savings goals over her latest luxury purchase request. Other husbands actually want to make their wives happy instead of treating every request like a personal attack on their precious budget or some kind of unreasonable demand. The manipulation became so sophisticated that she would time these conversations perfectly, waiting until I was completely exhausted from a difficult shift or emotionally drained from dealing with trauma and loss, then presenting her demands as tests of my love and commitment rather than unreasonable financial requests that could destroy our future stability and security. "I'm not asking for the moon, Blake," she'd say with perfectly practiced tears that seemed genuine until you noticed how quickly they appeared and disappeared. "I'm asking for a husband who shows he values me enough to make sacrifices for my happiness, the way every other husband in our social circle does naturally without being asked or needing detailed explanations about why their wives deserve nice things." As I began pushing back against Emma's increasingly unreasonable demands with the quiet determination of someone who was finally recognizing the patterns of manipulation, she deployed the nuclear option her wine bar friends had perfected through years of practice. Threatening divorce over seemingly trivial matters while I was emotionally and physically exhausted from saving lives and dealing with traumatic emergencies that would haunt most people for weeks. The first threat came when I refused to finance a $3,000 weekend getaway to Las Vegas after working a particularly traumatic shift where we'd spent 18 hours trying to save a family trapped in a house fire, and I'd come home covered in soot with images I couldn't shake from my mind. "Maybe we need to seriously reconsider whether this marriage is working," Emma said coldly when I explained that we simply couldn't afford another expensive trip so soon after the handbag and jewelry purchases. "I mean, if you can't prioritize our relationship over your precious budget concerns, then what are we even doing here together?" Blake's immediate panic and subsequent cave-in to her demands proved the tactic's devastating effectiveness beyond anything her friends had promised. The words hit me like a physical blow because divorce had never entered my mind as a possibility. I'd married Emma believing it was forever, through good times and bad, and the thought of losing her terrified me more than any fire I'd ever fought. "Emma, please don't say that," I pleaded, my voice shaking with genuine fear. "We can figure out the Vegas trip. Maybe I can pick up some overtime shifts or we can use some of the emergency fund." Watching me scramble to accommodate her demands after threatening our marriage gave Emma such a rush of power that she immediately began planning how to use this devastating weapon again. However, Emma failed to notice the subtle but significant shift in my demeanor after each threat, how my loving glances gradually became wary observations as I started analyzing her behavior patterns, how my spontaneous affection transformed into calculated peacekeeping gestures designed to avoid triggering another explosive confrontation, and how I quietly started documenting our conversations by recording them on my phone and saving her increasingly hostile text messages. The second divorce threat came just 6 weeks later when I suggested we needed to cut back on restaurant expenses and cook more meals at home to rebuild our depleted savings account. You know what, Blake? I'm starting to think Jessica was right when she said some men just aren't cut out for marriage, Emma announced dramatically while throwing her napkin down at the expensive steakhouse she'd insisted we visit despite our recent financial strain. Maybe I should have listened when she warned me that firefighters are too set in their ways and not ambitious enough for women who want more from life than mediocrity. Blake, trained to assess dangerous situations quickly during emergency responses, began recognizing the patterns of emotional abuse with the same systematic approach he used to evaluate fire hazards and structural weaknesses in burning buildings. I started documenting everything, screenshot her threatening texts, recording our arguments on my phone, and even keeping a detailed journal of her manipulation tactics and their timing relative to my work stress and emotional vulnerability. The third threat came during an argument about her desire to lease a luxury BMW that would cost $800 monthly when our current paid-off Honda was perfectly functional and reliable. "I can't keep living like this, Blake," she sobbed with perfectly timed tears. "I feel like I'm married to someone who doesn't care about my happiness or how I feel when I'm driving around in that embarrassing old car while all my friends have nice vehicles that reflect their worth." When I calmly explained that an $800 car payment would force us to move to a smaller apartment or take on credit card debt, Emma exploded with fury that revealed the true extent of her entitlement and manipulation. "You're impossible to please," she screamed. "Nothing I want is ever good enough for your budget. Nothing I need is ever important enough for you to figure out. Maybe my mom was right when she said I settled for someone who would never be able to provide the life I deserve." Emma became so intoxicated by her newfound power over me through these divorce threats that she completely missed the warning signs of a man who was methodically detaching from their relationship, how I stopped sharing details about my day, stopped making romantic gestures, and began responding to her demands with mechanical compliance rather than genuine desire to make her happy. I was systematically protecting myself while building a comprehensive case, using my emergency response training to methodically prepare for the day she would inevitably push too far and force me to choose between my financial security and her endless demands for luxury lifestyle funding. Emma's fourth divorce threat came during a heated argument about buying a luxury car she couldn't afford, delivered with her usual expectation of immediate capitulation and panicked begging. But this time something fundamental had shifted in my perspective and I calmly agreed with her suggestion and told her to go ahead, words that stunned her into complete silence for the first time in months of manipulation. "You know what, Blake? I think we should seriously consider divorce," she announced dramatically after I'd refused to co-sign a loan for a $65,000 BMW she'd found at the dealership during one of her shopping expeditions with her wine bar friends, expecting me to cave immediately like I had with her previous threats about our marriage ending. "I'm tired of being married to someone who doesn't understand that wives deserve to feel valued and appreciated through meaningful actions, not just empty words about budgets and financial responsibility that show a complete lack of commitment to their happiness." But instead of the usual panic and desperate negotiations she'd grown accustomed to triggering with these calculated threats, I looked up from my paperwork with complete calm and said, "You know what, Emma? You're absolutely right about everything. Go ahead and file for divorce if that's what you really want." The shock on her face was absolutely priceless. Her mouth fell open and she stared at me like I'd just spoken a completely foreign language, clearly expecting me to immediately backtrack and beg her to reconsider the way I had during her previous successful manipulation attempts that had always resulted in expensive purchases. "What did you just say?" she whispered, her confident demeanor cracking for the first time as she realized this conversation script wasn't playing out according to her carefully planned expectations. I said go ahead. I repeated with the same calm, controlled tone I used when directing emergency operations at complex fire scenes. If you honestly think divorce is the best solution to our relationship problems, then you should probably pursue that option immediately. Within days of that conversation, I had moved into the guest bedroom permanently, began working longer shifts at the fire station to avoid coming home to her increasingly desperate attempts to retract her threat and return to our previous dynamic, and started systematically separating our finances while consulting with one of Austin's most experienced and ruthless divorce attorneys about protecting my assets, pension, and future financial security. Emma initially dismissed my decisive actions as another manipulation attempt designed to make her back down from her ultimatum, convinced that I was playing some kind of sophisticated reverse psychology game that would ultimately result in her getting everything she wanted plus a heartfelt apology for making her worry about our marriage. "This is absolutely ridiculous, Blake," she'd call through the guest bedroom door while I was getting ready for work. "You're being completely childish and overdramatic about a simple conversation between married people. I never said I actually wanted a divorce. I was just expressing my legitimate frustration about feeling unappreciated and undervalued in our marriage." But I continued working overtime shifts, speaking to her only when absolutely necessary about practical household matters like bills and schedules, and making it crystal clear through my actions that I was taking her divorce threat at face value and preparing accordingly for the permanent end of our marriage. When the official divorce papers arrived via certified mail just 2 weeks later, Emma discovered with growing horror that I had hired one of Austin's most ruthless and experienced divorce attorneys, had been systematically documenting her threats and manipulation tactics for months using my phone's recording function, and building a comprehensive legal case that painted her as financially abusive and emotionally manipulative toward a public servant who risked his life daily. The man she thought she had successfully trained into submission through strategic divorce threats had actually been using his emergency response training to methodically prepare for the day she would inevitably push too far, gathering evidence and building a legal strategy with the same systematic approach I used to assess structural damage and safety risks in burning buildings. "Blake, this is completely insane," she screamed when she read through the detailed divorce petition that documented her manipulative behavior patterns, her repeated threats, and her unreasonable financial demands that had systematically strained our marriage to the breaking point over months of escalating abuse. "You can't actually be serious about this nuclear option. We can work things out through marriage counseling or something reasonable instead of this complete warfare approach." Emma realized with mounting panic that she had been playing checkers while I was playing four-dimensional chess, systematically documenting every manipulation tactic and building an ironclad legal case that would protect my assets and ensure her threats could never be used against me again in any future legal proceedings. The divorce proceedings revealed that I had been far more strategic than Emma ever realized. I had been recording our conversations on my phone for months, saving her threatening text messages and hostile emails in organized folders, and building a comprehensive case that painted her as financially abusive and emotionally manipulative toward a public servant who risked his life daily for the community. My attorney, Rebecca Martinez, was a seasoned family law specialist who had seen every manipulation tactic in the book and immediately recognized Emma's behavior patterns as textbook financial abuse combined with systematic emotional manipulation designed to extract maximum resources from a devoted partner through calculated psychological warfare. "Your documentation is absolutely extraordinary," Rebecca told me during our first consultation while reviewing the extensive evidence I'd gathered with military precision. "Most people going through emotional abuse don't have the presence of mind to document everything systematically the way you did. This recording of her threatening divorce unless you bought her a BMW is particularly damning, and these text messages show a clear pattern of escalating financial demands." Emma's attorney advised her during what I later learned was a particularly brutal consultation that Texas's no-fault divorce laws meant her manipulation tactics actually worked against her in asset division proceedings, especially since I could prove with concrete evidence that she had been making unreasonable financial demands that systematically damaged our financial stability while I risked my life for the community daily. The court doesn't look favorably on spouses who use divorce threats as weapons to extract expensive purchases, her lawyer explained with obvious concern about the case's prospects. Your husband's documentation shows a clear pattern of financial abuse, and combined with his spotless record as a first responder and his systematic evidence gathering, this creates a very unfavorable situation for your position in these proceedings. The evidence I'd gathered was absolutely devastating to Emma's case. Recordings of her explicitly stating that she viewed me as her financial safety net rather than a romantic partner, text messages where she compared me unfavorably to other husbands based solely on income and spending power, and detailed documentation of her escalating demands that had depleted our savings account and retirement funds for luxury purchases she couldn't afford. Emma had foolishly put many of her manipulative thoughts in writing, sending text messages like, "Blake needs to understand that real husbands prioritize their wives' happiness over budget concerns," and "I deserve better than someone who makes excuses about money when I want nice things that show my worth." Her digital trail provided an extensive record of financial abuse that would have been impossible to deny in court. The court awarded me the majority of our shared assets, including our house that we'd been saving for together and both retirement accounts that I'd been contributing to responsibly, while Emma was left with significant credit card debt she had accumulated during her luxury spending sprees and absolutely no viable way to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to funding through emotional manipulation and divorce threats. Judge Patricia Williams, who had presided over hundreds of contentious divorce cases during her distinguished career, made it abundantly clear during the proceedings that she found Emma's documented behavior particularly troubling given my profession and exemplary service record to the community. Mr. Blake has dedicated his career to saving lives and serving this community with distinction, the judge stated during the final hearing while reviewing the evidence. The extensive documentation shows that instead of supporting her husband's noble career, Mrs. Blake systematically undermined their financial stability through calculated manipulation and repeated threats. This court cannot and will not reward such destructive behavior. Emma's wine bar friends suddenly became completely unavailable for support once word spread throughout their social circle about the divorce proceedings, apparently terrified that associating with someone going through such a public and well-documented divorce disaster might damage their own carefully curated reputations and potentially expose their own manipulation tactics to legal scrutiny. It's absolutely amazing how quickly fair-weather friends disappear when the going gets tough, Rebecca observed after Emma showed up to court proceedings alone for the third consecutive time. These women who taught her these manipulation tactics want nothing to do with her now that there are serious legal consequences involved. Emma was left to face the devastating consequences of her calculated actions completely alone, realizing far too late that her wine bar advisors had given her tactics that worked effectively in the short term but created massive long-term legal vulnerabilities when used against someone intelligent enough to document everything systematically and build an ironclad case. 2 years post-divorce, I've been promoted to fire captain and am in a healthy, genuine relationship with Sarah, a trauma nurse who appreciates my dedication to saving lives and treats me as an equal partner rather than a financial resource to be systematically exploited through calculated manipulation tactics. Sarah understands the unique demands and emotional toll of my job because she works in the same high-stress emergency environment, and when I come home completely exhausted from a particularly difficult shift, she offers genuine support and understanding instead of using my vulnerability as an opportunity to extract expensive purchases through emotional blackmail and guilt trips. "I'm so proud of what you do every day," she tells me regularly with complete sincerity, and I can see in her eyes that she means every single word, unlike Emma who viewed my firefighting career as merely an excuse for not making enough money to fund her increasingly expensive luxury lifestyle fantasies. We split all household expenses fairly based on our respective incomes, plan our future together with mutual respect and genuinely shared goals, and neither of us ever weaponizes our relationship with threats of abandonment when we disagree about spending priorities or major life decisions. Meanwhile, Emma works as a night shift manager at a budget hotel chain, pulling exhausting long hours for minimal pay while living in a cramped studio apartment she can barely afford even with her drastically reduced living standards and 2 demanding part-time jobs that leave her constantly stressed about money. The luxury items she had demanded with such desperate manipulation during our marriage now sit completely unused in her tiny apartment, serving as constant daily reminders of how her wine bar manipulation tactics ultimately destroyed the stable, loving relationship she had foolishly taken for granted with a man who risked his life daily to save others. The $800 designer handbag sits gathering dust on a cheap plastic shelf next to discount store items. The expensive jewelry remains unworn because she has nowhere fancy to go and no one special to impress, and the designer clothes hang unworn in a closet barely large enough for her basic necessities and work uniforms. Emma spends her increasingly lonely evenings obsessively stalking my social media accounts and Sarah's Instagram posts, watching me thrive personally and professionally with someone who genuinely values my character and integrity over my paycheck and spending power, while she struggles daily to pay rent despite working two demanding jobs that leave her exhausted, bitter, and full of regret. I've heard through various mutual acquaintances that she constantly complains about her current situation, claiming she was treated unfairly in the divorce proceedings and that I was vindictive and cruel for systematically documenting her manipulative behavior, but she never takes any responsibility for the calculated manipulation tactics that systematically destroyed our marriage. She asks everyone if they think you'll ever take her back, my former neighbor mentioned casually during a chance encounter at the grocery store. Says she's finally learned her lesson and knows what real love looks like now, but everyone can tell she's just desperate to escape her current situation. But I learned what genuine, healthy love actually looks like when I met Sarah, and it doesn't involve threats, manipulation, financial exploitation, or treating your romantic partner like a human ATM dispensing luxury goods on demand whenever you feel entitled to something expensive. My story serves as a cautionary tale about recognizing the warning signs of emotional and financial abuse, having the courage to document everything systematically, and walking away from someone who fundamentally views you as a resource to be exploited rather than a beloved partner to be cherished. Sarah and I are planning to buy a house together next year, combining our savings responsibly and building something meaningful based on mutual respect rather than one-sided financial exploitation disguised as love. Emma's dramatic downfall illustrates a fundamental truth that her wine bar advisors never mentioned during their Thursday night manipulation workshops, that threatening to leave someone will eventually result in them helping you pack your bags, and if you've been financially abusive, you might lose everything you thought you deserved in the process. The bitter irony isn't lost on me that Emma got exactly what she repeatedly threatened she wanted, but discovered far too late that divorce meant losing the stable, devoted partner she'd taken for granted rather than gaining the wealthy lifestyle she'd felt entitled to through systematic manipulation.